No, we only weapon now with Kamla. Hello, good day. Welcome to the third part of our leadership webinar series in the month of July. It's a pleasure hosting with you. I am Nirmala Maharaj. And as we move into our topic today, it's all about mastering the emotions. And our presenter, someone who has been warmly introduced in the two previous webinar sessions, Dr. Kamla Mungal. Kamla, welcome. And
thank you very much.
and I also say welcome to our participants joining us across the Caribbean region. Now, today, as we look at this particular topic, we moved from this being the final one for this leadership series, this tripartite leadership series, and we're going to take take the side of looking at our emotions and the power and the gift our emotions can reveal in helping us to improve productivity and the trust within our organizations. As we customary do on our webinars, we invite you to keep your mic on mute, certainly to post your questions in our chat box, your contributions, questions, comments in our chat box for recognition during that time of our proceedings. Without further ado, I invite Dr. Mungal to take us through this webinar today.
Okay, a very pleasant good afternoon, everyone, and I trust you are well and that you're making the most of whatever time you have day by day, and you're making the most of all the opportunities that are presented our way in this very different time in which we are living. So I want to start with this very clear statement that a lack of emotional mastery hurts you. And I didn't say might hurt you or may hurt you. I said that a lack of emotional mastery hurts you. And then I also said that it hurts many others. And here I'll say it is likely to hurt many others as well. And I'm sure we perhaps never really think about how much our own lack of emotional mastery can hurt us and can hurt the people all around us. So I'll give you some examples, right? But before I give you those examples, I just want you to think about how you make decisions. Do you make decisions rationally, or do you make decisions more emotionally, or do you do both? And I'll launch this poll for you now, and let's see how you respond. Okay, we just have a couple more people to respond. All right, I'll give it just about 5 seconds again, and then I will share the results with you. And now later down in the webinar, I want you to reflect on how you chose, what decision, what choice you made based on this poll. All right. So here's your results. We have and we have an even spread between persons saying that they make decisions more rationally and those who recognize that emotions do play some part in how we make decisions. And then one saying, well, totally more emotionally. All right, excellent, excellent. So here's an example of how our lack of emotional mastery hurts us and others. You know, and this is taken since April 2017, and it's up to 2019, I believe. And it says over that period, 263 celebrities, politicians, CEOs, and others, these are some of the names of those who have been accused of sexual misconduct. And you note that these people are in high positions. Yes? And that stimulated the launch of the Me Too movement. And certainly a lot of women's movements are now cropping up. And women are taking, as a group, are taking a stronger position, and they have a stronger voice with respect to not just women's issues, but that has now morphed into them taking a voice in political issues and so on, standing up for those who have been segregated or sidelined or in some way disenfranchised or disempowered over the years. And so, as with everything else, these movements will be shaped and they will be shifting in accordance with what their principal ideology would be. And this is all about being fair to people, being respectful of women, and recognizing that you do not have the right to harass and certainly abuse women. So this is an example of where a lack of emotional mastery by people who are climbing the ladder can help to bring them down. And I call it your Achilles heel. You know, we also have, for example, David Cohen, who is a former lawyer for Donald Trump, and he made these statements after he was put in jail. I am ashamed of my own failings. I'm ashamed of my weakness and my misplaced loyalty. He talked about being ashamed that he took part in these acts rather than listening to his own conscience. He said lying was normalized. And this is the thing. Some of these things become so normalized that we forget that they are actually wrong. So when lying became normalized, everybody started to lie, and it became quite normal to lie. And so you lose sight of your conscience. You can't feel it anymore. And so power, ambition, and the intoxication of that power led to some very bad decisions. That kind of intoxication represents a lack of emotional mastery. When things become so normalized and we cannot feel our conscience guiding us, we become ruled by that kind of environment, and we end up in trouble. So we can end up in a lot of trouble. At the personal level as well, we find that we are unable to make good choices with respect to what to eat. And so we have a prevalence of non-communicable diseases in the Caribbean, cardiovascular diseases, cancers, diabetes, and so on. And really a lot of them are related to lifestyle, habits that we have developed over time. And we say, I can't do without this or that because this is what I grew up with, and so on. And so we've developed these habits over time, and so we pay a price for it. And really, it's the inability to choose, to master the emotions so that we could make the right choices about what we should eat, and so on. All right, and you note that the four main risk factors, all within our control: tobacco use, the harmful use of alcohol, unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, all our choice. They all have to do with our choice. And we have also seen that a lack of emotional mastery, and this is really critical even at this time, where we have seen, for example, in the media, people being called by names of animals, and so on. And that breeds a kind of disgust about those people, you know, varying levels of anger and hatred, those kinds of emotions. And that could lead to genocide. That could lead to us saying, well, just wipe them out, you know, just wipe them out. Because suddenly that human being is no longer a human being. Suddenly that human being becomes like a cockroach or an ant that you step on almost without thought. And when we dehumanize, and we've seen, as I said, many instances of people being dehumanized, it's something that we want to be very cautious about, because that starts a very slippery slope. Just like Kofi Annan said, he said that genocide begins with the killing of one man, not for what he has done, but because of who he is. Or in the case when we dehumanize people because of what we think they are. And here's an example of 10-year-old child, and we have many children in this situation right now. He said, sometimes I get terribly sad because I can't imagine what my life will be like. I'll never see my parents again. And yet I'll see the people who kill them and those people's children for the rest of my life. I can't bear the thought of it. All right. And we want to examine at the end how Donyata, his statement, can change with increasing emotional mastery. Because clearly right now he is at depression stage. He's at the stage where he cannot see any kind of light, any kind of positivity going forward. So a little bit about the background of emotional mastery, and I said we'll move from intelligence to mastery. There was a time in the 60s, 70s, and so on when it was very normal for us to talk about intelligence as a single factor. So we talked about people having a high IQ or a low IQ, and that's it. So you're either intelligent or you're not based on the IQ figure. Until Howard Gardner in the late 70s, early 80s, put forward the theory of multiple intelligences, recognizing that social life values much more than what was considered to be that single factor intelligence. And that social life is made up of a number of spaces in which we can demonstrate profound intelligence. And he identified these 9 areas: logical, mathematical, existential, which has to do with your spirituality; naturalistic, the extent to which we have that kind of affinity for the environment; visual, spatial, those who are physical, bodily kinesthetic people, um, can, we have a lot of, in the Caribbean, we have a lot of athletes, for example, who have great bodily kinesthetic intelligence, musical intelligence, and so on, linguistic intelligence. These two in particular, the intrapersonal, meaning knowing yourself and being intelligent about who you are, as well as the interpersonal, being intelligent about in relationships, being able to empathize with others, and so on. Those two intelligences are pretty much what Daniel Goleman brought together and talked about and called, in fact, emotional intelligence. So he said that we are being judged now by this new yardstick, not just by IQ or how smart or how trained we are, how much expertise we have. We are being judged by how well we handle ourselves and how well we interrelate with each other. And that is the theory of the foundation and in essence, the theory of emotional intelligence. So what is it? It's not about being nice all the time. No, it's really about being honest about your emotions. It's not about being touchy-feely. It's being aware of your feelings and those of others. It comes with that heightened awareness of your feelings and the feelings of others. So it's not about being emotional. It's about being smart with your emotions, being able to recognize them, and very importantly, being able to control and manage them. He identifies 5 essential components of emotional intelligence. The first 3, that's self-awareness, self-regulation, self-motivation. Relating, the way we relate to ourselves speaks to that personal or intrapersonal competence. And the last 2 relate to a social competence, how we relate to others, having empathy, and being able to manage those relationships using all kinds of tools, like, for example, conversational intelligence, which helps us to build a stronger relationship with other people as well. So you can see the 2 there, the 2 intelligences identified by Gardner: intrapersonal and interpersonal, being essential components of emotional intelligence. So what are these emotions that we're talking about? A little bit of the neuroscience behind it, and the biology behind it, in fact. our emotions are chemical responses to stimuli. You know, these are very objective and very public, because as soon as you get a stimulus could come from smell, taste, you know, you have five senses. And so you get that stimulus, your brain naturally decides, am I seeing a threat, or am I feeling safety? What am I feeling? Am I feeling a threat, or am I feeling safe? And so that chemical response that is generated is seen in your face, your posture, your voice. It affects your heart, your blood pressure, your skin conductance, you sweat, and so on, your endocrine responses. That is objective, right? And you're very unaware most of the time that these are taking place, right? Your body, then your brain, sorry, then interprets that stimulus, and that interpretation takes place giving cognizance to your experiences of the past, the way in which you have interpreted that same kind of stimulus in the past. So for example, uh, my little niece, we'd go to the zoo, and she would go straight for the snakes, and she would come out with a snake around her neck and all of that. And I will not, simply because of the way that I have been conditioned over time to treat with that kind of stimulus. So she sees love and she sees pet, and I see fear. I am frightened by it. So we become conscious of the feelings, but the stimulus, as the point I'm making is that the stimulus is just the stimulus, right? The way in which you interpret that stimulus gives rise to your feeling. And these are some basic human emotions. So we all have them. We're all born with them. We're hardwired with them. We're hardwired with fear, anger, disgust, shame, sadness, surprise, joy, and love. And we are conscious of our feelings and the intensity of our feelings. And what we do is to combine those emotions. We combine those emotions, and that results in our feelings and the intensity of our feelings. So for example, being curious. To be curious is a combination of the emotion of surprise. I never thought about it like that. So it's surprise, and then there's excitement and trust as well, combined with that to give us that feeling of curiosity. Okay. So I just put it together in a little diagram for you that pretty much the environment is a stimulus, and your brain does that initial part of perceiving threat or reward. But the way in which you do the interpretation now will create that bodily response, will enhance the bodily response and enhance the kinds of chemicals. And these are chemicals, right? They're flooding your body. And so you want to be cautious of what kinds of chemicals you are flooding your body with. And then that informs your behavior. And this is how you hurt others, especially. In your own behavior, very often when we have uncontrolled or we have high levels of fear, high levels of anger, and so on, it's of course reflected in what we say and what we do. And that's exactly how we hurt others when we lack that emotional mastery. And so this is just another diagram showing you the 8 basic emotions. I would have mentioned them before. And I highlight these 3 at the end because these 3 are at the attachment end. So you notice there's the survival end. So you get a stimulus, and you can either, there's fight or flight. You can run away, or you can stay and fight, which is more of the survival kind of mechanism. And then there are the attachment emotions: surprise, excitement, trust. These are also called converter emotions, because what you can do is you can deliberately draw on them. You can deliberately draw on them and combinations of them in order to reset your mind. Yes? So if for example, in my case and my example with the snake, I can draw on trust and I can draw on some kind of excitement, I am better able to replace the fear that has been embedded in my mind, and really is what I use to make judgments about any kind of snake coming around. All right, so these are the three very powerful emotions or converting emotions that can help us in this journey of mastery. This is a Plutchik's wheel of emotion, and it really just signals how we combine the emotions to give these feelings of submission, awe, and so on. And the wheel really, and you can search this online, the wheel really shows you how you have different intensities. So you feel different intensities of the emotion that your body has experienced. Now, a little bit more about the brain. The emotional brain, which is called the amygdala, is really powerful, and it is very fast. So it helps you to make decisions very quickly. All right. It's irrational, however. It's illogical, right? It works on the basis of those chemicals. All right, so it really takes over. It can take over if you fail to engage your higher brain. All right, your higher brain, hold a second, which is your thinking brain, right? You are able, when you can master your emotions, you are able to disengage the emotional brain and engage the thinking brain a lot more. So for those of you who said that you tend to use your cognition, you use rationality much more than you use your emotional brain or emotions in this decision making, that is physically what happens, right? That you take the stimulus from the amygdala and you send it to your higher brain or your thinking brain. Thing is, that's a slower process. It's 5 times weaker. And so you have to actually engage that process very deliberately. So it's not impromptu. You actually have to engage it deliberately. And I put this reading here for you, Thinking Fast and Slow. So just when we think that we are rational, Daniel Kahneman shows us how much of our thinking and our decision making is actually guided by what he calls system 1, which is the emotional brain, the amygdala response, and so on, right? So he gives a lot of experiments that really demonstrates to you that just when you think you're rational, you're probably not so. You're probably not so much. And so we recognize that emotions dictate a lot of our decisions. It's a fascinating book to read, so I would encourage you to read it. Tara Swart is a neuroscientist who has now become more of a leadership educator. She works with companies to develop their leadership. And she says this. She says that the things we want most, our health, our happiness, wealth, love, they are all governed by our ability to think, to feel, and act. Think, feel, and act. In other words, they are governed by our brain. And I'll share a little bit more about her work and and she does both still. She's a neuroscientist and she's a leadership educator, a consultant in leadership. And by the way, neuroscientists are now becoming the most highly paid consultants in leadership. She makes these points that emotions bias all decisions. And as I said, when you think you're making a rational decision, it is very likely that your emotions are swaying and interfering with that decision making in one way or the other. And that she says that high levels of emotions like shame and sadness, and just for, not that these are negative, but for our purposes, I'll call them the negative emotions, because really you do not want to stay there. You do not want to stay with that experience of feeling shame and feeling sad and feeling guilty and so on. Reason is that you cannot move forward from that position. So while there are some things that can happen that can cause you to feel those things, you want to quickly recognize what you're feeling, and then you want to move on, because you can't get into positivity and positive change from there, right? And they will release your stress hormones like cortisols. And those cortisols, when they flood your body, you get all feelings of feeling weak. You could actually physically feel weak. You could feel that pain in your gut, a kind of emptiness, a kind of hollowness, without that emotional mastery. And if you keep that with you, you are very, very, very sure to be hurting yourself as you keep those stress hormones, those chemicals flooding your body. And what they do, they lock in those negative beliefs. You can't articulate to yourself what is the better life, what is the better space, how can I move forward. So these I would call more of our negative emotions. And stress, when we are under stress, you tend to make more amygdala driven decisions. You go straight to the amygdala, straight to the emotional system, and therefore your decisions may not be the best ones. So here's another poll for you. I'm going to launch it for you now. Okay, let me see. Poll. All right. I will stop this. Okay. All right. I'm having a little bit. Okay, there we are. There we are. All right. So this poll is, I believe I can deliberately change the way I think. And that's very simple. I'd like you to choose yes or no. I believe I can deliberately change the way I think. All right, I'm hoping a couple of people more will respond. I don't have all the participants as yet. So I'm gonna give you a couple seconds again. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna share the results with you. And so we have many more people saying that they believe that they can deliberately, by your actions, change the way you think. And that is critical. Starting with the belief that you can actually reshape your brains, because science can say many things. You will read many things online. But unless you hold that belief yourself, you can be stymied in your efforts to actually execute it. So it's great that many of you have the belief that you can change the way you think, because that is a great plus for you. And Santiago Ramon y Cajal says, and he's another neuroscientist, he says this, every man can, and by the way, women, don't feel badly, everyone can, if he so desires, become the sculpture of his own brain. You have to want it, and you have to practice it, right? As with all my leadership sessions, I will say to you, if you do not put into practice what we've been talking about, then all you would have gained is cognition. You would have gained some knowledge about what leadership is all about, but you would not have gained the benefit of leadership development. So he says that you can, if you desire, if you believe it, if you want it, you can reshape your own brain. And that is now it's now a truism, as accepted in the world of psychology, that you are able to and you must manage your brain for best performance. So how do we master these emotions? Well, according to Tara Swart, she says we should challenge our autopilot thinking, or what Kahneman calls system one thinking. Challenge that. Don't take the immediate answer that comes to you. All right, challenge that autopilot thinking and rewire your brain's pathways so you can fulfill your potential. And I call that principle consciousness, or developing your principle consciousness, because very often when you examine what comes out, you get a stimulus and something comes out of your mouth immediately. You get a response immediately. When you examine that response is usually filled with biases of the past. It has not considered new evidence. It has not considered your own purpose and your own vision for your life. So it doesn't consider future very much. To do that, you really have to engage system 2. You have to engage your higher brain, and that requires effort. Manifest the things you want by directing your energy towards your deepest values and ambitions. She said, see your purpose, see it, try to envisage it, try to give life to it. See the things that you want, and it's then that you can develop that hunger, that kind of passion that we talk about, so that your energies are directed there. If you focus, we've seen a lot of people focus negatively, and they want to do something to somebody because somebody did something to them, and you get bogged down in that kind of negativity. Well, it's hard to get out of that kind of rut. So you really do not want to do that. You want to focus on your values, your ambitions, your legacy, and direct your energy there. She talks about the power of visualization. You can make it very explicit and very real, to prime your brain. So if that's what you really want, prime your brain to look for anything that might be associated with that. And by the way, all of this, when you do mindfulness as well, you recognize that the more you are engaged in this visualization, the more you are engaged with whatever it is you think you want to achieve, is the more likely you're going to achieve it, because your attention is diverted there. Attack life with confidence, dispel fear and that negative thinking, negative emotions. You promote more positive thinking. And we've spent a long time in the previous webinar talking about the power of positive thinking and the power of a growth mindset. So emotional mastery is definitely a source of our leadership power, and learning to master our emotions is critical to our advancement. Yesterday I had a TV interview, and I was talking to the host about, people who just feel they can be one thing in one place, and they feel, well, in this space, I must really carry on. I must just, knock it in. I must be dominant and so on. And so you force yourself to put on something like that. Or you might find that you carry on and you curse and you get on, and somebody records it, and that becomes your Achilles heel. Do not let that kind of behavior, negative emotions be your default. Okay? And certainly it affects our ability to make the best decisions to design our future. So here is the statement by Donata again at age 11. I'd like you to look at it and say, okay, if this child is developing some emotional mastery and he can bring positivity into this, what might the statement look like? What might we hear him saying? What kinds of words will be in this statement? If you can think about it, I'd like you to share just a couple thoughts in the chat. Tell us what you think might change. What will he say differently? So I'll appreciate if anyone can just share one or two suggestions about how this statement will be different. What will he be saying differently? Anyone, you can just say what you think. No takers? He'd be looking for justice and revenge? All right. Do you think revenge will be indicating to us that he's mastering his emotions? Maybe justice. I would love to see justice, because justice has to do with it's a field of virtue and ethics. It has to do with ethics. He can try to make sure no other person kills the same way again. Absolutely. Absolutely. Forgiveness. So we might be seeing a line about some with forgiveness somewhere in there. Yes? Seek to forgive. Absolutely. Because again, from this negative emotion, bear in mind what I said at the first, that you are hurting yourself for sure, and you are likely to be hurting others. Yeah. Because if he grows up with this kind of feeling, keeping these emotions, keeping these thoughts, it is very likely that he will pass that on to his kids, his friends, whoever is next to him. So I have a comment in the question and answer box that says, what Donyata says is dependent on the time that has elapsed. If this statement is being said approximately 10 years after what appears to be the demise of his parents at the hand of someone else, then he will be driven to toxicity. Hopefully, as time passes, his emotions will transform to forgiveness and peace. And this is a very important comment. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Is it a question of time, or is it a question of something else? Yes? Is it that we must allow time to pass for us to move from a condition of negative thoughts and feelings, negative emotions and feelings, into positive one? What does it trigger? Is it trigger time, or is it trigger something else? And that's what we're going to talk about as we go on. All right. So here's what I'm thinking might be a better outcome, an outcome that demonstrates greater emotional mastery. I see a family and think of my parents. The emotion of sadness is evoked. I feel sad. Yes? Right, I saw your comment. Time is important. Okay, justice can be misconstrued and not equal to his hurt. Yes, of course, definitely. Many people feel that there is nothing like equity, and complete fairness. It's always, that scale is always balancing. It never really evens out. So yes, he can recognize that I am feeling sad. I think of my parents. My parents have been killed. I feel sad. Recognize the emotion. I feel anger, pain. I feel unfairly treated, right? So whatever is the situation, and in this case, he felt that, I have been robbed of my parents. I feel that pain. So we want to connect to that. We want to recognize what that feeling is. But this is a transition. I've got to get back to my values. I've got to go back to my purpose. I've got to get back to me, right? I can connect to my values. And this is the transition with emotional mastery. I can forgive and I can focus on my own purpose. I feel differently now. From the time I talk about forgiveness, it's like, for those of you who pray, it's almost like you have something that is weighing down on you, and then you say a prayer and you give it up. It's similar to that. Forgiveness is about giving up the hurt, giving it up to whatever else. In the case of prayer, you're giving it up to God. In the case of your forgiveness, you're giving it up. Just give it up to the world, to the spirituality, to the cosmos. And I will feel differently. I feel serene. And now I can show love. I can show love to whoever, even to the killer. And I've seen many cases. There was a Charlestown murder, if you recall, in the US, South Carolina, I think it was, Charlestown. And this young lady, 14 years old, she got on the news and she said, I know my parents have been killed. It was her mother. I know my mother has been killed. And she went to church all the time. She was killed in the church. But my mother would never bear anger. My mother would never bear revenge. She would never speak of those things. She has taught us to forgive. And so I forgive that killer. It didn't take a day. It didn't take a year. It didn't take long. It was almost immediate based on her upbringing and her experiences and so on with her mother. So this transition, sometimes we think it is connected with time, and sometimes it is, depending on what it is, but more so, it is connected with our values and our purpose, our ability to bring that to the fore, and that is within your own command. It is within your own reach. Okay, so I rewrote the statement in a different way. I said, sometimes I get sad when I think about my parents. I know they were killed, and I often see their killers and their children. I forgive them and wish a better life for their children and mine. I work to ensure this does not happen again. And your comments in the chat box, many of you spoke about forgiveness and working to ensure it doesn't happen again. That's what drove the development of organizations like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. They are working to make sure it doesn't happen again. All right. I also want to share with you, so in addition to bringing your values and your purpose to the fore, there are many practices for us to now calm our minds, give ourselves that space to experience something different, something much more positive. And you would have all heard about meditation and introspection. You can do it as a formal practice or not a formal practice. And I thought I'd share with you a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is based in neuroscience, and it is the science behind those practices of meditation and introspection and so on. One of the greatest proponents, and he has had tremendous success in dealing with people with anxiety and depression and so on, Dr. David Burns. I had the pleasure of listening to him quite recently. And I'm sorry, right. And he said, oh, I'm sorry, previous. He said, human beings are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of them. And that's profound. The world is what the world is. The environment is the environment. There will be wars, there will be famine, there'll be drought, there'll be fighting, violence, crime. There'll be all of that in our environment. We would all have to face people dying. We'd all have to face our friends and relatives dying, Okay, I'm seeing your, Kerwin, I'm seeing your testimony. Right, that is sad, he's presently before the courts. Okay. Yes, so these feelings, people will do all kinds of things to you, Kerwin. The point is that you cannot allow the external environment to dictate your own emotional mastery, your own behavior and choices about how to feel and how to think, So a lot of these people who do these things, it's really a matter of ignorance, really a matter of, and I agree, it's easier said than done, but you know what? If you start doing it, and this is why I give you this is precisely why I gave you the Healthy Minds program from Dr. Burns. This is an app that you can download and use the app, and it can guide you to that practice. And it could, as I said, it could be a formal practice, or it can be a practice that you do in your everyday activities. It doesn't have to be anything like sitting down and meditating for half an hour. It doesn't have to be that. And the app is tremendous, I think, but you need to follow it. As with everything else, you need to practice it, because you are not hurting. It was Mandela who said that revenge or resentment. He said resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it will kill somebody else. Just very simply, resentment is like drinking poison. So you holding that anger and that resentment is you drinking poison. You are flooding your body with cortisols and you're hoping it will do some harm somewhere to somebody else. And even if you're not hoping that, it is still like drinking poison. Cortisols can only hurt you. They're really just meant to get you off the bed and wake you up in the morning, but during the day, you're not supposed to be flooding your body with those things, right? So I would recommend that you use the app and recognize that the environment is the environment. We all have to face it. Some of us will face it with with a kind of grace and a kind of positivity, and then others will be devastated by it. You don't want to be in that space of being devastated and then you transfer that now onto others. But as I said, it will take your practice. For you to become an athlete, you have to practice. For you to become a musician, you have to go on the keyboard and practice. You have to play the violin. You actually have to practice. Leadership is an art that is developed in the practice. So you actually have to follow it. And I think an app is something that a lot of people now can use to follow, something that's a step-by-step kind of process to guide you and take you there. And I thought, this is one of my favorite quotes, Abraham Lincoln, when he said, "I don't like that man." Normally, many of us would say right away, "Get him out of my sight. I don't want to be around him. I don't even want to hear him. Turn off the radio if he's talking. I don't like that man." But Abraham Lincoln didn't say that. Right in the next sentence, look at the emotion he put in place. Look at him draw on the power of curiosity and the power of being surprised. Why is that man behaving so? I don't like what he's doing. I don't like that man, but I must get to know him better. Immediately, he drew on something positive. He drew on those converter emotions. So the more you practice it, guys, is the more you're going to master it. And the better you will be for yourself, the better you'll be for others. You will remove your Achilles heel and you will have a better chance of being a great leader, demonstrating that leadership in your homes, in your offices, amongst your friends, and so on. Really being able to deploy the best you at all times, and not wasting time and hurting yourself in the process. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I would just open it up for any questions. Please feel free to turn on your mics and, ask any question you may have or put it in the chat or in the question and answer box. So while I give it another minute, I just want to remind you about how you chose in the very first poll. Do you believe that you can deliberately rewire your brain? That is what neuroplasticity is one of the greatest discoveries for me of this century. That we always thought that when your brain cells died and when you created pathways in your brain, they were fixed. But the ability to rewire our brain is one of the most profound discoveries, and we can do it, but we just have to practice it. It's an active practice. Comes with the meditation, comes with introspection, any of those kinds of practices, to look at what is happening in a very different way. A very different way. All right, well, if we have no questions, it's a little bit before, it's 1:21, but I will say goodbye to you. Nirmala, this is our last webinar Wednesday for now, I believe.
Yes, it is.
So Lockjack will, of course, let you know when the webinar Wednesdays will resume. But today is the last one for now.
And we
So
certainly hope that the webinar Wednesdays, this one, the previous sessions have been beneficial to you, especially during this time. COVID-19, it was launched during the COVID-19 period, and we can continue with it continuously up until this time in different topic areas, some strategy to finance, to HR, to leadership, bringing you a plethora of areas to and tips to consider to strengthen your organizations and as individuals.
all right, so I have a question about when I normally think rationally and make decisions rationally, but when I see someone who is violating some of what I consider to be my deep values, I tend to react more emotionally. You have already made the first step to emotional mastery, and that first step is to articulate and recognize what has happened to you, right? Being able to say it clearly like that is the first step to emotional mastery. So identify the feelings, identify when they occur, and then now you have to take the step to say, okay, what is my own purpose? What would I like to leave behind? And how can I not allow the behavior of others to inform my own behavior? How can I prevent that from happening? And you see those same converter emotions, the love, the forgiveness, the surprise, excitement, and so on. Those positive emotions, you bring that into play. And some of us will use our religion as well. Religion has a lot of positives to give us. So, for example, if you draw on the Bible will tell you, he who is without sin cast the first stone. So while you can recognize that what this person is doing is against the values that you have and that you perhaps share with many others, this is his sin, and you will have your own. And who are you to judge? You know, so following the Bible, that's a help, and it's written in many other religious texts as well. It is in Hinduism as well. Um, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's written in all religions, for example. So these are there to remind us about the better me and to remind us to deploy the better me. So go to the positive and find the positive about that situation, because you know what? You can't even help that person if you stay where you are. You can't help yourself because you are flooding yourself with those cortisols, and you can't help the person, which is ultimately what we are all here to do. We are all here in the service of each other. And we have to get to that place where we could reach out, forgive, understand, and guide. You know, to be a leader is to be a great model. And as we take care of these feelings that we have, these emotions that we have, that helps us to be a better model. I hope I've answered your question. And please feel free, you can email me to ask any other questions as well. Yes, someone has raised your hand. Isidore? Please go ahead, you can turn on your mic. Okay, my email address, I can type it in the chat. I'll share both with you. I have a Gmail. Right, so I've shared both with you in the chat, both my email addresses. Somebody wanted to raise a hand? Or you're not seeing the mic. Nirmala, I'm not sure if we turn the mics on for the attendees. Let me see. Participants. Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Okay, thanks. I just want to ask something. If you, when you give a presentation and
Mhm.
a question is posed at you as a leader, and you keep showing emotions like sad, happy, is that a bad thing? Or how do you get over it? Like just to show a straight face and no emotion being expressed at that
Well,
moment.
yeah, I hear you. I don't think it is necessarily a bad thing. It depends on the emotions, of course. If you're getting angry at everything that is being said, then certainly you are not demonstrating that emotional mastery. Emotional mastery is a great source of leadership power. So your leadership becomes compromised when you do that. And it is all about the way you think, right? Because what happens as you are doing that presentation, you might be looking at someone, they might be asking a question, or you might be concluding already, oh boy, he's going to ask a dumb question again. Oh boy, he's going to take me off course. And when that conversation that takes place in the back of your mind is what is causing you to have this emotional response. So you need to manage the background conversation that you're having with yourself and listening more intently, listening carefully, openly, with curiosity will help you to do that. So it's the same emotion that you want to bring to the fore: curiosity, respect. You know, those are the kinds of principles. Respect is a principle. That principle of respect will help you to listen more intently so that you take away that background conversation and you are fully engaged with the person at that moment. Mindfulness exercises will teach you to be absolutely non-judgmental. So whatever you hear, you want to understand it and then be able to respond to it. Um, your background conversation is what creates the tendency to come to some conclusions about either the speaker as a person or what the speaker is going to do, and then you respond in that negative way. So
Oh, okay,
yeah,
thanks.
you're
Yes.
most welcome. Any other questions? All right. Well, it was a pleasure being with you again. I trust that you will take the learnings and, you know, just go ahead and practice it. Get the app, you know, and go ahead and practice. Start today. You will be surprised how much you will change. Trust me, you go ahead and practice it. Even your family will recognize the difference in you. Yes, and emotional mastery, as I said, is a critical component, critical source of your leadership power. And it's all within our grasp. You just have to practice it. All right. All the best to you. I really enjoyed spending the time with you, and I want to wish you all the best. I do think I have another question. Oh, okay. It was a comment. You are most welcome. All the best to all of you.
Okay. Thanks, Kamla. Thanks, participants. All the best to you. Have a wonderful evening. Bye bye.
Bye.